Welcome to a journey that could fundamentally change how you approach success, wealth, and power. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood principles from Sun Tzu's The Art of War, a principle that separates the truly successful from those who flame out spectacularly. We're talking about the deadly trap of showing off, and why the greatest victories are often invisible to the world. Most people have it completely backwards. They think success means flashing wealth, broadcasting achievements, and making sure everyone knows how important they are. But Sun Tzu understood something profound over 2,500 years ago that most people still don't grasp today. The supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting. This isn't just about warfare. It's about life, business, and the pursuit of lasting success. Think about this for a moment. When you show off, what are you really doing? You're revealing your hand. You're giving your competitors intelligence about your capabilities, your resources, and your strategies. You're painting a target on your back. You're inviting envy, scrutiny, and opposition. The moment you start peacocking your success, you've already begun the process of undermining it. Sun Tzu taught that all warfare is based on deception. Now, before you misunderstand this, he wasn't advocating for dishonesty in the sense of lying or cheating. He was talking about strategic concealment, keeping your true strength, your real plans, and your actual capabilities hidden until the moment you need to deploy them. In the modern world, this translates to something we desperately need to understand: the power of operating in stealth mode. Let's talk about why showing off is so psychologically appealing, because understanding this urge is the first step to mastering it. Humans are wired for status signaling. We evolved in small tribes where demonstrating our value to the group was literally a matter of survival. The person who could show they were the best hunter, the strongest warrior, or the most resourceful provider would receive the most resources, the best mates, and the highest social position. But here's what our ancient brains don't understand. The modern world has changed the game entirely. What worked in a tribe of 150 people can destroy you in a connected world of 8 billion. When you show off today, you're not just signaling to your immediate tribe, you're broadcasting to everyone, including people who would love nothing more than to see you fail. Consider the psychology of the person who constantly shows off their wealth. They post pictures of expensive cars, designer clothes, luxury vacations, and expensive meals. What they think they're communicating is success and desirability. What they're actually communicating is insecurity and vulnerability. They're telling the world exactly how much they have to lose. They're providing a roadmap for anyone who wants to target them, whether that's criminals, gold diggers, tax authorities, or business competitors. Sun Tzu wrote, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. But when you show off, you're giving everyone else perfect knowledge of you while remaining ignorant of their intentions. You're reversing the information advantage that Sun Tzu considered essential for victory." Now, let's examine how this principle has been applied by some of the most successful people in modern history, starting with Warren Buffett. Here's a man who could afford to live in the most expensive mansion in America, drive the most exotic cars, and wear the most expensive clothes. Instead, he lives in the same modest house in Omaha that he bought in 1958 for $31,500. He drives older cars, often Cadillacs or Lincolns, but nothing flashy. He eats at regular restaurants and shops at regular stores. Why does Buffett live this way? Is it because he's cheap? Absolutely not. It's because he understands something fundamental about wealth building that most people miss. Every dollar you spend on showing off is a dollar that's not working for you. But more importantly, Buffett understands that his unassuming appearance is actually a competitive advantage. When he walks into a business meeting, people underestimate him. They see an elderly man in an ordinary suit and assume he's not a threat. This gives him an enormous advantage in negotiations and deal-making. Buffett has often said that his greatest investment skill is patience, but what he doesn't always emphasize is how his humble appearance contributes to this patience. Because he's not worried about impressing anyone with his lifestyle, he can focus entirely on making the right financial decisions rather than the flashy ones. He can wait years for the right opportunity because he's not under pressure to maintain an expensive image. Think about the psychological freedom this gives him. While other wealthy people are trapped by their lifestyle inflation, needing to maintain expensive homes, cars, and social obligations, Buffett can deploy his capital wherever it will generate the highest returns. His modest lifestyle isn't just about saving money, it's about maintaining strategic flexibility. Now, let's contrast this with someone like Bernie Madoff, who represents the opposite approach. Madoff was obsessed with appearances. He belonged to exclusive country clubs, owned multiple luxury homes, wore expensive suits, and constantly projected an image of sophisticated success. This wasn't just vanity, it was central to his business model. He needed to look successful to attract investors to his Ponzi scheme. But here's what's fascinating. Madoff's obsession with showing off ultimately led to his downfall. The more he flaunted his wealth, the more scrutiny he attracted. Investigators became interested in how someone could generate such consistent returns while living such an obviously expensive lifestyle. His show-off mentality created the very attention that eventually exposed his fraud. The contrast between Buffett and Madoff illustrates a profound truth about wealth and power. Sustainable success comes from building real value while maintaining a low profile, while unsustainable success often relies on appearances and eventually crumbles under scrutiny. Let's talk about Jeff Bezos during the early days of Amazon. In the 1990s, when Amazon was just getting started, Bezos could have easily played the role of the flashy tech entrepreneur. He could have rented expensive office space, bought luxury cars, and projected an image of immediate success. Instead, he famously started Amazon in his garage and continued to operate with extreme frugality for years. Bezos understood that every dollar spent on appearances was a dollar not invested in growing the business. More importantly, he understood that appearing too successful too early would attract competition and scrutiny that could destroy Amazon before it had a chance to establish itself. By maintaining a low profile and focusing on execution rather than publicity, Amazon was able to grow and establish market dominance before competitors fully understood the threat. Even as Amazon grew larger, Bezos continued to apply this principle. He drove a Honda Accord well into the 2000s, long after he could afford any car he wanted. He didn't move to a mansion or start living an obviously wealthy lifestyle until Amazon had become so dominant that competitors could no longer threaten its core business. This strategic patience and humility weren't just personal choices, they were business strategies directly inspired by Sun Tzu's teachings about concealing your true strength until you're ready to deploy it decisively. Consider how different Amazon's story might have been if Bezos had taken the opposite approach. Imagine if he had immediately started living like a tech billionaire, renting expensive offices, hiring high-profile executives, and generating media attention about his wealth. Competitors like Barnes & Noble or Borders would have taken the threat seriously much earlier. They would have invested heavily in their own online platforms before Amazon could establish its dominance. The regulatory scrutiny that Amazon faces today would have started much earlier, potentially preventing the company from reaching its current size and influence. Now, let's examine how this principle applies to someone like Elon Musk, who seems to violate it constantly. Musk is famous for his flashy lifestyle, expensive cars, and constant presence on social media. However, a closer examination reveals that Musk actually applies Sun Tzu's principles more cleverly than it appears. While Musk is very public about his lifestyle and personality, he's extremely secretive about his actual business strategies and technical capabilities. Tesla and SpaceX both operate with extreme secrecy about their core technologies. Musk's public persona actually serves as a form of misdirection, while everyone is focused on his tweets and public statements. His companies are quietly developing breakthrough technologies that competitors don't fully understand until it's too late to catch up. Musk's apparent showing off is actually a sophisticated form of strategic deception. He presents himself as an eccentric, unpredictable figure, which causes competitors and critics to underestimate his business acumen. While they're focused on his latest Twitter controversy, his companies are gaining insurmountable technical and market advantages. This brings us to a crucial distinction. There's a difference between strategic visibility and mindless showing off. Strategic visibility involves controlling your public image to achieve specific business or personal goals. Mindless showing off is simply trying to impress people with your wealth or status without any deeper purpose. Let's talk about how this principle applies to ordinary people building wealth and success. The temptation to show off increases exponentially as your income and assets grow. You get your first significant raise, and suddenly you want everyone to know about it. You buy your first luxury car, and you can't wait to post pictures on social media. You take an expensive vacation, and you document every moment for public consumption. But here's what happens when you succumb to this temptation. You become trapped by your own image. Once you've established yourself as someone who lives an expensive lifestyle, you become psychologically committed to maintaining that image. This means you'll make financial decisions based on appearances rather than sound investment principles. Think about someone who buys an expensive car to impress their friends and colleagues. Not only have they tied up capital in a depreciating asset, but they've also committed themselves to maintaining that level of spending. They can't easily downgrade their car without feeling like they're signaling financial problems. They become trapped by their own show-off mentality. Contrast this with someone who drives a reliable but unremarkable car while investing the difference in appreciating assets. Not only do they build wealth faster, but they maintain the flexibility to make decisions based on financial logic rather than social pressure. The same principle applies to housing, clothing, vacations, and every other aspect of lifestyle. The person who lives below their means while building wealth has options. The person who spends everything they make on appearances has trapped themselves in a cycle of working to maintain their image rather than building lasting wealth. Sun Tzu taught that the clever combatant looks to the effect of combined energy and does not require too much from individuals. In modern terms, this means focusing on systems and results rather than personal recognition. The most successful people build systems that generate wealth and success without requiring them to constantly prove their worth through displays of affluence. Let's examine how technology has changed the showing-off game. Social media has made it easier than ever to broadcast your success to the world, but it's also made the consequences of showing off more severe. When you post about your expensive purchases, luxury vacations, or business successes, you're not just communicating with your friends. You're creating a permanent digital record that can be used against you by competitors, criminals, tax authorities, or anyone else who might want to target you. Consider the entrepreneur who constantly posts about their business success on Instagram. They think they're building their personal brand and attracting customers. In reality, they're providing their competitors with detailed intelligence about their operations, strategies, and financial condition. They're also attracting the attention of people who might want to sue them, rob them, or otherwise take advantage of their success. The smart entrepreneur builds their business quietly, focuses on serving customers rather than impressing observers, and keeps their financial condition private. They understand that real success comes from building value, not from broadcasting achievements. This brings us to one of the most important applications of Sun Tzu's teachings in modern life, the power of compound growth. Compound growth works best when it's allowed to operate without interference. When you show off your early success, you invite interference in the form of competition, regulation, taxation, and social pressure. Think about compound interest. $1 invested at 10% annual return becomes $2.59 after 10 years, $6.73 after 20 years, and $17.45 after 30 years. But this only works if you leave the money alone and let it compound. If you withdraw money to fund an expensive lifestyle, you interrupt the compounding process and dramatically reduce your long-term wealth. The same principle applies to business growth. A business that reinvests its profits and grows quietly can achieve exponential growth over time. But if the owner extracts money to fund an expensive lifestyle and constantly publicizes the business's success, they attract competition and interference that slows or stops the growth process. Warren Buffett's wealth didn't come from high income. It came from starting with modest capital and letting it compound for decades without interference. His humble lifestyle wasn't just about saving money. It was about avoiding the distractions and pressures that could have interrupted his compounding process. Now, let's talk about how powerful people maintain their power by avoiding the show-off trap. The most powerful people in the world are often people you've never heard of. They own media companies, but don't appear in their own publications. They control massive financial resources, but live modest public lives. They influence political decisions, but avoid the spotlight that comes with elected office. Consider the Rothschild family, which has maintained enormous wealth and influence for over 200 years. The family's longevity comes partly from their understanding that visible wealth attracts unwanted attention. While they live comfortably, they avoid the kind of ostentatious displays that would make them targets for revolution, taxation, or regulation. The family operates multiple businesses and investments, but they do so quietly. They don't seek publicity for their successes, and they don't try to become celebrity business people. This allows them to focus on building and maintaining wealth rather than managing public perception. Contrast this with wealthy families who couldn't resist the temptation to show off and ended up losing everything. The Russian oligarchs who flaunted their wealth in the 1990s and 2000s eventually became targets of government seizure. Many lost their fortunes when political winds changed, and their conspicuous wealth made them easy targets. The principle applies to corporate strategy as well. The most successful companies often achieve dominance by growing quietly until they're too large for competitors to challenge effectively. Google didn't announce its intention to dominate online advertising. It simply built better technology and captured market share while competitors were focused on other priorities. Amazon didn't proclaim its goal of becoming the everything store until it had already established dominant positions in multiple markets. Facebook didn't announce its intention to control social media globally. It simply executed better than competitors while maintaining a relatively low profile during its crucial growth phase. These companies understood that announcing ambitious goals attracts competition and regulatory attention that can prevent you from achieving those goals. It's better to execute quietly and let results speak for themselves. Let's talk about how this principle applies to personal relationships and social dynamics. People who constantly brag about their successes, wealth, or achievements often find that their relationships become shallow and transactional. Others start to see them as sources of resources rather than genuine friends. Think about someone who can't have a conversation without mentioning their expensive purchases, high income, or important connections. What happens to their social relationships? People either become resentful of their success or start to view them as ATMs rather than friends. Either way, they lose the genuine connections that make life meaningful. Contrast this with someone who achieves success but remains humble and focused on others. They build deeper, more authentic relationships because people know they're not trying to impress or manipulate them. These relationships often become sources of business opportunities, personal support, and genuine happiness that money can't buy. Sun Tzu wrote, "Know yourself and you will win all battles." Part of knowing yourself is understanding your own psychological needs and weaknesses. The need to show off usually comes from insecurity and a desire for validation. Once you recognize this, you can find healthier ways to meet these psychological needs. Instead of seeking validation through displays of wealth, successful people often find validation through the quality of their work, the strength of their relationships, and their contribution to causes they care about. This provides much deeper satisfaction than the temporary high of showing off material possessions. If you're still here, that means you're serious about understanding and applying these principles. Comment stealth mode below and let me know that you're ready to embrace the power of strategic invisibility. Let me know that you understand the difference between real success and the appearance of success. The transformation starts with changing your relationship with success itself. Instead of viewing success as something to be displayed, start viewing it as something to be accumulated. Instead of spending money to look successful, invest money to become successful. Instead of talking about your plans, execute your plans quietly and let results speak for themselves. This doesn't mean living like a monk or depriving yourself of reasonable pleasures. It means being strategic about how you deploy your resources and present yourself to the world. It means understanding that real wealth comes from owning assets that generate income, not from owning toys that drain income. Let's examine some practical applications of this philosophy. When you receive a significant raise or bonus, your natural impulse might be to upgrade your lifestyle immediately. The Sun Tzu approach would be to maintain your current lifestyle and invest the additional income in appreciating assets. Not only does this build wealth faster, but it also maintains your flexibility and avoids the psychological trap of lifestyle inflation. When you achieve a business success, your natural impulse might be to celebrate publicly and share the news widely. The Sun Tzu approach would be to celebrate privately and use the success as a foundation for even greater achievements. Public celebrations attract attention and competition that can undermine future success. When you're negotiating a salary, business deal, or any other financial arrangement, your natural impulse might be to emphasize your successes and achievements. The Sun Tzu approach would be to let your track record speak for itself while focusing the conversation on the value you can provide to the other party. This principle becomes even more important as you achieve greater success. The higher you climb, the more visible you become, and the more people will be watching for opportunities to knock you down. This is why many of the world's wealthiest people live relatively modest public lives while building their wealth through business and investments rather than high-profile careers. Consider how this applies to career advancement. The employee who constantly brags about their achievements and lobbies for recognition often creates resentment among colleagues and supervisors. They may receive short-term recognition, but they also create enemies who will work to undermine their long-term success. The employee who focuses on delivering exceptional results while maintaining humility often advances more quickly and sustainably. They build alliances rather than enemies, and their achievements speak for themselves without needing to be advertised. The same principle applies to entrepreneurship. The entrepreneur who constantly promotes their own success and genius often alienates potential partners, customers, and employees. They may generate short-term attention, but they struggle to build the lasting relationships that successful businesses require. The entrepreneur who focuses on serving customers and building a great product while maintaining humility often achieves more sustainable success. They attract loyal customers, dedicated employees, and supportive partners because people know they're not just in it for personal glory. Now, let's address a common concern. Won't people underestimate you if you don't promote your successes? This is where Sun Tzu's wisdom becomes particularly relevant. He taught that being underestimated is often an advantage, not a disadvantage. When people underestimate you, they don't prepare adequately for competition with you. They don't try to poach your employees, steal your customers, or copy your strategies. They don't lobby for regulations that would constrain your business. They don't try to tear you down out of envy or resentment. This gives you the freedom to focus on execution rather than defense. You can build your business, accumulate wealth, and develop capabilities without constantly fighting off attacks from competitors and critics. Think about how this applies to investment strategy. The investor who constantly brags about their returns and investment picks attracts copycats who drive up prices and reduce future returns. They also attract scrutiny from regulators and tax authorities who may limit their investment opportunities. The investor who quietly builds a diversified portfolio and compounds returns over time often achieves better long-term results with less stress and interference. They can focus on making good investment decisions rather than managing their public image as an investment guru. This brings us to the concept of what we might call stealth wealth. Stealth wealth means building and maintaining significant financial resources while living a lifestyle that doesn't obviously reflect your net worth. This isn't about being cheap or depriving yourself. It's about being strategic with your resources and maintaining flexibility. Someone with stealth wealth might drive a reliable but unremarkable car while owning significant investment assets. They might live in a nice but not ostentatious home while having substantial liquid savings. They might take enjoyable vacations without feeling the need to document them for social media. The advantages of stealth wealth are enormous. You avoid becoming a target for criminals, gold diggers, or frivolous lawsuits. You maintain the flexibility to make financial decisions based on logic rather than image concerns. You can weather economic downturns without the pressure of maintaining an expensive lifestyle. You can retire or change careers without worrying about maintaining appearances. Most importantly, stealth wealth allows you to focus on what really matters: building lasting financial security, maintaining meaningful relationships, and pursuing activities that provide genuine satisfaction rather than social validation. Let's talk about how this principle applies to social media, which has become the primary platform for modern showing off. The temptation to document and share every success, purchase, and achievement is stronger than ever. But social media showing off carries unique risks that didn't exist in Sun Tzu's time. When you post about your successes on social media, you're creating a permanent record that can be used against you by anyone with an internet connection. Criminals can use your posts to target you for theft. Competitors can use your posts to understand your business strategies. Tax authorities can use your posts as evidence of unreported income. Lawyers can use your posts to argue that you can afford large settlements. The smart approach is to use social media strategically rather than impulsively. Share content that builds your professional reputation or serves your business goals, but avoid posting about personal wealth, expensive purchases, or detailed business information. This doesn't mean you have to live like a hermit or avoid all social media. It means being thoughtful about what you share and why you're sharing it. Ask yourself, does this post serve a strategic purpose, or am I just trying to impress people? If it's the latter, consider keeping it private. Now, let's examine how this principle applies to philanthropy and social responsibility. Many wealthy people feel pressure to engage in conspicuous philanthropy, making large, public donations that generate media attention and social recognition. While philanthropy is admirable, the motivation matters. Philanthropic showing off can actually reduce the effectiveness of charitable giving. When you make public donations primarily for recognition, you're more likely to choose causes that will generate positive publicity rather than causes that will create the most positive impact. You're also more likely to give in ways that benefit your image rather than ways that benefit the recipients. Anonymous or low-profile philanthropy often achieves better results because it allows you to focus on impact rather than recognition. It also avoids creating expectations that you'll continue giving at the same level indefinitely, which can become a financial burden if your circumstances change. Some of the most effective philanthropists in history have operated with minimal publicity. They've focused on solving problems rather than receiving credit, and their giving has often been more strategic and impactful as a result. This brings us to the question of legacy and long-term thinking. Sun Tzu emphasized the importance of winning without fighting, which requires thinking several moves ahead of your opponents. In modern life, this translates to building a legacy that lasts rather than seeking immediate recognition that fades. The person who shows off their success may receive short-term validation, but they often sacrifice long-term security and flexibility. The person who builds wealth and capabilities quietly may not receive immediate recognition, but they often achieve more lasting success and satisfaction. Think about the difference between building a personal brand and building a business. Personal branding requires constant attention and promotion. You have to keep generating content, appearing at events, and promoting yourself to maintain relevance. This can become exhausting and can distract from the work that actually creates value. Building a business or investment portfolio requires patience and consistency, but it generates compound returns that can eventually provide financial independence. You're building something that works for you rather than something that requires you to constantly work for it. The same principle applies to skill development. The person who constantly promotes their expertise and achievements may build a reputation quickly, but they often stop developing their actual capabilities because they're too busy managing their image. The person who focuses on continuous learning and improvement while maintaining humility often develops deeper expertise and more lasting success. They're not trapped by their public image, so they can continue growing and adapting as circumstances change. Let's talk about how this applies to leadership and management. The leader who constantly emphasizes their own importance and achievements often creates resentment and resistance among their team members. They may get compliance, but they rarely get the enthusiastic support that leads to exceptional results. The leader who gives credit to others and focuses on team achievements while maintaining personal humility often inspires genuine loyalty and extraordinary performance. Their team members feel valued and empowered, which leads to better results for everyone. This doesn't mean being weak or passive as a leader. Sun Tzu taught that true strength often appears as gentleness, and that the most effective leaders achieve their goals through influence rather than force. The humble leader who consistently delivers results and supports their team will ultimately have more power and influence than the leader who constantly promotes themselves. If you're still with me at this point, you're demonstrating the kind of patience and focus that separates successful people from those who get distracted by short-term gratification. Comment "Invisible Power" below to let me know you're committed to building real success rather than the appearance of success. The transformation we're talking about isn't just about money or career success. It's about a fundamental shift in how you approach life. Instead of seeking validation from others, you learn to validate yourself through your actions and results. Instead of comparing yourself to others based on visible markers of success, you focus on building the capabilities and resources that provide genuine security and satisfaction. This shift requires rewiring some deep psychological patterns. Humans are naturally social creatures who seek approval and recognition from others. The showing-off impulse taps into these deep-seated needs. Overcoming it requires finding healthier ways to meet these psychological needs while building real success. One of the most effective ways to do this is to find a sense of purpose that goes beyond personal recognition. When you're working toward goals that genuinely matter to you, whether that's building a business that solves important problems, supporting causes you care about, or creating something of lasting value, you become less dependent on external validation. The entrepreneur who starts a business primarily to get rich and famous will make different decisions than the entrepreneur who starts a business to solve a problem they care about. The first entrepreneur will be more tempted to show off early successes and may sacrifice long-term viability for short-term recognition. The second entrepreneur will be more likely to focus on building a sustainable, valuable business regardless of whether they receive immediate recognition. This principle applies to every area of life. The person who exercises to look good at the gym will make different choices than the person who exercises to build long-term health and vitality. The person who learns new skills to impress others will approach education differently than the person who learns to expand their capabilities and understanding. Let's examine how this philosophy applies to financial planning and wealth building. The conventional approach to financial success often involves visible markers of achievement: expensive cars, large homes, luxury vacations, and designer clothes. This approach can actually slow down wealth accumulation because it diverts resources from investments to consumption. The Sun Tzu approach to wealth building involves maximizing the gap between income and expenses while avoiding the temptation to display wealth visibly. This doesn't mean living in poverty. It means being strategic about spending and focusing resources on assets that generate future income rather than items that impress others. Consider the difference between buying a luxury car and investing the same amount of money in dividend-paying stocks. The car will depreciate in value and require ongoing expenses for insurance, maintenance, and fuel. The stocks will generate income that can be reinvested to generate even more income. Over time, the difference in outcomes becomes enormous. But the psychological challenge is that the car provides immediate social validation while the stocks provide no immediate recognition. This is where Sun Tzu's teachings about delayed gratification and strategic thinking become crucial. The person who can resist the immediate gratification of showing off will achieve much greater long-term success. This principle becomes even more important as your income increases. Lifestyle inflation, the tendency to increase spending as income increases, is one of the biggest obstacles to wealth building. The doctor who makes $300,000 per year but spends $295,000 to maintain an expensive lifestyle has less financial security than the teacher who makes $50,000 per year but saves $10,000 annually. The high-income person who succumbs to lifestyle inflation often finds themselves trapped in what we might call golden handcuffs. They need to maintain their high income to support their expensive lifestyle, which limits their career flexibility and increases their stress levels. They may appear successful to others, but they're actually financially vulnerable. The person who maintains modest lifestyle expenses regardless of their income level has much more flexibility and security. They can take career risks, weather economic downturns, and retire earlier because they're not trapped by expensive lifestyle commitments. Now, let's talk about how this principle applies to business strategy and entrepreneurship. The most successful businesses often grow quietly in the early stages, focusing on serving customers and building capabilities rather than generating publicity and recognition. Think about how Amazon developed its business model. Rather than announcing their intention to revolutionize retail, they started by focusing on books and gradually expanded into other categories. They invested heavily in logistics and technology, while competitors dismissed them as a niche online bookstore. By the time traditional retailers understood the threat, Amazon had built insurmountable advantages in customer service, selection, and efficiency. The same pattern applies to many successful companies. They focus on execution rather than promotion in the early stages, which allows them to build sustainable competitive advantages before attracting serious competition. This doesn't mean avoiding all marketing and promotion. It means being strategic about when and how you promote your business. The goal is to build a strong foundation before attracting attention that could bring unwanted competition or regulatory scrutiny. Let's examine how this principle applies to innovation and creative work. The innovator who constantly promotes their ideas and seeks recognition for their creativity often finds that their ideas are stolen or copied by others with better resources or execution capabilities. The innovator who develops their ideas quietly and focuses on implementation rather than recognition often achieves better results. They can refine their concepts, build prototypes, and test their ideas without alerting competitors to the opportunity.